The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers and clattered against the concrete floor of my garage. Not because my hands were shaking, though they probably should have been, but because what I just overheard through the thin kitchen window made me forget I was holding anything at all. Mom, seriously, he's always out there with his stupid car anyway. Dad's too busy playing mechanic to notice anything. Emma's 14-year-old voice carried that particular brand of teenage cruelty that cuts deeper than any knife. My wife Alyssa's laugh was soft, conspiratorial. Your father has his priorities, sweetheart. Craig and I are just old friends catching up. Craig. The name hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. Craig Morrison, her college boyfriend from 20 years ago. The one she'd mentioned casually 3 months back when she said he'd reached out on social media. Just nostalgia, she'd called it then. Nothing important. I crouched beside my 1987 Chevelle, pretending to inspect the oil pan while my world tilted sideways. The October wind whistled through the gaps in my garage door, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the promise of a harsh winter. Here in Edgewater, Michigan, we knew all about harsh winters, in weather and in life. When are you seeing him again? Emma asked, and I could hear the excitement in her voice. My own daughter, thrilled about her mother's affair. Tomorrow afternoon, he's taking me to that new place in Grand Rapids, the one with the wine cellar. The place I'd suggested for our anniversary last month. The one Alyssa had dismissed as too expensive for what we can afford right now. Apparently, Craig could afford it just fine. I stayed crouched there for another 10 minutes, listening to them plan my humiliation with the casual efficiency of women discussing a grocery list. When their voices finally faded toward the living room, I stood up slowly, my knees protesting. 41 years old, and I already felt ancient. My reflection stared back at me from the chrome bumper of the Chevelle. Graying temples, lines around my eyes, hands permanently stained with motor oil. Dave Patterson, former plant manager turned small-town mechanic after the factory closed, the American dream in reverse. But as I stood there in my garage, surrounded by the tools of my trade and the remnants of my pride, something cold and calculating began to form in my chest. They thought I was too stupid to notice, too busy with my stupid car to pay attention to my wife's sudden interest in afternoon appointments and evening conferences that ran until midnight. I walked to my workbench and pulled out the shoebox where I kept receipts for tax purposes. Funny how a man develops habits without realizing their importance. 3 months of credit card statements, gas receipts, and random scraps of paper that Alyssa had left scattered around the house. The pattern emerged like a photograph developing in a darkroom. Tuesday, September 15th. A lunch at Romano's, $67. She'd told me she ate at her desk that day. Thursday, September 24th. Motel 8 on Highway 37, $89. She'd been at a client meeting in Lansing, or so she'd said. Friday, October 2nd. Victoria's Secret, $134. I hadn't seen any new lingerie. The receipts painted a picture more vivid than any surveillance photo. My wife of 16 years, mother of my 2 daughters, was methodically dismantling our marriage one expensive lunch at a time. I heard the front door close and Alyssa's heels clicking across the kitchen linoleum. She appeared in the garage doorway, still wearing her charcoal business suit, looking every inch the successful lawyer she'd worked so hard to become. "How's the car coming along?" she asked, her voice carrying that forced cheerfulness that had become her default tone with me. "Making progress," I said, not looking up from the engine. "You know how these old things are. Takes time to figure out what's really wrong under the hood." She nodded absently, already checking her phone. "I'll be working late again tomorrow. Big case coming up." "The Morrison case?" I asked casually. Her fingers froze on the screen for just a moment. "What?" "Nothing. Just wondering what kind of case keeps you out so late these days." "Personal injury. Very complicated." She was already backing away from the garage. "Don't wait up." After she disappeared into the house, I pulled out my own phone and opened the browser. Craig Morrison wasn't hard to find. Mortgage broker, divorced 2 years ago, driving a new Tesla Model S according to his social media posts. His profile picture showed a man desperately clinging to his college physique, all teeth and hair gel. I scrolled through his recent posts. Photos from expensive restaurants, vacation shots from places I'd never been able to afford, and comments from various women telling him how lucky they were to reconnect. My wife had liked every single post for the past 3 months. The garage suddenly felt too small, too confining. I needed air, space to think. I grabbed my keys and headed for Murphy's, the bar attached to Vic's boxing gym downtown. If anyone would understand the particular rage of being played for a fool, it would be Vic Murphy. The drive through Edgewater's empty streets gave me time to process what I'd learned. Past the shuttered factory where I'd once managed 200 workers, past the elementary school where Sophie still went to 4th grade, past the house where Alyssa's mother, Lorraine, held court over the town's social hierarchy like some sort of Midwestern monarchy. Murphy's was nearly empty when I arrived, just a few regulars nursing beers and watching college football on the ancient television above the bar. Vic looked up from polishing glasses, his scarred face breaking into a grin. Dave Patterson, twice in 1 month. Must be serious. I slid onto a bar stool and gestured for a beer. Remember when you told me that the hardest punch to see coming is the one thrown by someone you trust? Vic's expression shifted, the bartender's smile replaced by the look of a man who'd seen his share of betrayal. What happened? Found out my wife's been meeting her college boyfriend, 3 months now, maybe longer. You sure? I pulled out my phone and showed him Craig's social media profile. Pretty sure, unless she's developed a sudden interest in mortgage rates and Tesla automobiles. Vic studied the screen, then looked at me with something approaching respect. Most guys come in here ready to start swinging. You seem remarkably calm. I'm thinking. Dangerous habit for a man in your situation. I took a long drink of beer, feeling the cold liquid cut through the bitter taste in my mouth. You know what the worst part is? My own daughter's in on it, talking about how I'm too stupid to notice, too busy with my cars to pay attention. Kids don't understand consequences. They just see the excitement. And my wife sees what? A chance to relive her college days with someone who didn't lose his job when the plant closed? Vic leaned against the bar, his massive forearms crossed. So what are you going to do about it? The question hung in the air like smoke. What was I going to do? The old Dave Patterson, the plant manager who'd tried to save everyone's jobs right up until the day they locked the gates, would have confronted Alyssa directly, would have demanded explanations, begged for another chance, promised to change. But that Dave Patterson had believed in fairness, in doing the right thing, in the basic decency of people. This Dave Patterson, the one sitting in a bar at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night, surrounded by the ghosts of better men, was learning to think differently. I'm going to give them exactly what they want, I said finally. Vic raised an eyebrow. Which is? Each other. I finished my beer and left a 20 on the bar. Outside, the October wind had picked up, rattling the streetlights and sending leaves skittering across the empty parking lot. I sat in my truck for a moment, watching the neon sign for Murphy's flicker against the darkness. My phone buzzed with a text from Alyssa. Working late. Don't wait up. I started the engine and pulled out onto Main Street, driving slowly through the town where I'd lived my entire life. Past the high school where Alyssa and I had met, past the church where we'd married, past all the landmarks of a life that was apparently ending without my permission. But as I drove home to my empty house and my unsuspecting daughters, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Purpose. They thought they were playing me for a fool. They had no idea that the fool was about to become something much more dangerous. A man with nothing left to lose and all the time in the world to plan his revenge. The next morning, I woke up before dawn with the clarity that comes from finally understanding your situation. Alyssa was already gone. Early meeting, according to the note on the kitchen counter, and the girls were still asleep. I had the house to myself and a plan forming in my mind. I started with her laptop. Alyssa had always been careless with passwords, using the same combination of our anniversary date and Sophie's middle name for everything. Her email opened like a flower blooming in fast forward, revealing months of correspondence that made my stomach turn. The messages started innocent enough. Craig had reached out through LinkedIn in July, mentioning he'd seen her name in the local legal journal. Remember when we talked about changing the world? His first message read, "Looks like you actually did it." By August, the tone had shifted. I keep thinking about that weekend we spent at the lake house senior year. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd made different choices? September brought logistics. Hotel reservations, restaurant confirmations, and increasingly intimate exchanges about their renewed connection. The most recent message, sent yesterday afternoon, made me close the laptop before I read something that would push me past the point of calculated revenge into pure rage. I needed evidence, not emotion. I spent the next hour going through our joint credit card statements with the methodical precision I'd once used to analyze production reports. The pattern was even clearer in black and white. Every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 6 weeks, charges appeared at restaurants I'd never been to, hotels I'd never seen, stores that specialized in the kind of intimate apparel my wife hadn't worn for me in years. The total came to just over $3,000. $3,000 of our money I'd earned fixing transmissions and changing oil, spent on rekindling a romance with a man who'd abandoned her 20 years ago for someone with better connections. My phone rang, interrupting my accounting. Alyssa's name appeared on the screen. "Hey," I answered, keeping my voice neutral. Hi, honey. I just wanted to let you know I'll be late again tonight. This case is really demanding. The Morrison case? A pause. It's actually the Henderson case. I misspoke yesterday. Interesting. Yesterday it was personal injury. Now it had a different name entirely. Sounds complicated? Very. Don't wait up, okay? I might be really late. After she hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at the phone. 20 years of marriage, and she'd become a stranger who couldn't even keep her lies straight. The woman who used to call me 3 times a day just to hear my voice now couldn't manage a 5-minute conversation without deception. I called my shop and told Jerry, my assistant, that I'd be in late. Then I drove to the Motel 8 on Highway 37. The desk clerk was a kid who couldn't have been more than 20, with the kind of acne and attitude that suggested he'd peaked in high school. His name tag read Tyler. "Help you?" he asked without looking up from his phone. "I'm trying to track down some charges on my credit card. My wife made a reservation here last month, but I can't remember the exact date." Tyler's eyes flicked up to meet mine, suddenly interested. "We can't give out guest information, man. Privacy laws and stuff." I pulled out my wallet and placed a $50 bill on the counter. "I'm not asking for information. I'm asking for confirmation of charges that already appeared on my statement." The 50 disappeared faster than a magic trick. Tyler turned to his computer and started typing. "What's the name?" "Alyssa Patterson. Or maybe she used Morrison." His fingers paused on the keyboard. "Morrison, yeah. She's been here a bunch of times. Always pays cash after the first visit, though." "Cash." "Of course. After the credit card charges started showing up, she'd switched to cash to cover her tracks, but she'd gotten sloppy, or maybe confident. The recent charges suggested she'd stopped being careful." "How many times would you say?" Tyler shrugged. "Maybe 6 or 7, always with the same guy, drives that fancy electric car." I thanked Tyler and left another 20 on the counter. "For your discretion." "What discretion?" he said with a grin that suggested he understood exactly what kind of discretion I was buying. Back in my truck, I sat in the motel parking lot and tried to process what I'd learned. 6 or 7 visits that Tyler knew about, probably more when other clerks were working. This wasn't a casual rekindling of an old flame. This was a full-blown affair, complete with regular meeting places and established routines. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Dad, can you pick me up from school? Mom's in meetings all day." All day. While she was supposedly buried in legal briefs, she was actually planning another afternoon with Craig Morrison. The casual way she'd incorporated the lie into her schedule, using our daughter as an alibi, made something cold settle in my chest. I picked up Emma and listened to her chatter about school, friends, and the upcoming Halloween dance. She seemed genuinely happy, unaware that her casual comments the night before had detonated a bomb in the foundation of our family. "Mom's been working a lot lately," she said as we pulled into our driveway. "She has. Important case. She seems happier, though, like more energetic." Out of the mouths of babes. Even my 14-year-old daughter had noticed the change in Alyssa's demeanor. The woman who'd been distant and distracted for months was suddenly vibrant again, just not with her family. That evening, I waited until both girls were asleep before returning to Alyssa's laptop. This time, I went deeper, checking her browser history and deleted files. What I found there painted a picture of a woman who'd been planning this affair with military precision. Google searches for "how to hide financial transactions," "can deleted text messages be recovered," and "Michigan divorce laws" filled her recent history. She'd been researching everything from offshore accounts to child custody arrangements. The most damning search was from just 3 days ago. When to tell children about divorce. She wasn't just having an affair, she was planning her exit strategy. I copied everything to a flash drive, then cleared my own digital footprints. If Alyssa was planning for war, she'd find out that her supposedly oblivious husband had learned a few things about strategy during his years managing a factory floor. Around midnight, I heard her car in the driveway. I closed the laptop and pretended to be asleep when she slipped into bed beside me, smelling like expensive cologne and lies. "How was your case?" I murmured into the darkness. "Exhausting," she whispered back, "but we're making progress." Progress. I almost laughed at the irony. We were both making progress, just toward very different goals. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to Grand Rapids. If Alyssa and Craig had established routines, I wanted to know what they were. The restaurant she'd mentioned to Emma, Vintner's Table, was exactly the kind of place I'd always wanted to take her for special occasions, but couldn't afford on a mechanic's salary. I parked across the street and waited. They arrived separately, which showed more operational security than I'd expected. Craig pulled up first in his Tesla, checking his reflection in the side mirror before walking inside. Alyssa arrived 10 minutes later, looking around nervously before entering the restaurant. I watched them through the large front windows, sharing wine and intimate conversation like any other couple celebrating their relationship. The casual way Craig reached across the table to touch her hand, the way Alyssa threw back her head and laughed at something he said, it was like watching strangers wearing the faces of people I'd once known. They stayed for 2 hours. When they left, they walked to Craig's car together, and I watched my wife of 16 years kiss another man in broad daylight, 30 miles from our home. I followed them to a different hotel, this one considerably more upscale than the Motel 8. They disappeared inside, and I sat in my truck feeling the last of my illusions crumble into dust. But along with the pain came something else, a cold, calculating anger that felt almost refreshing in its clarity. They thought they were so clever, so careful. They had no idea that their careful planning was about to become the foundation of their destruction. I drove home and spent the rest of the afternoon in my garage, ostensibly working on the Chevelle, but actually planning the next phase of my investigation. By the time Alyssa came home that evening, client meeting ran long, sorry, I had a complete dossier of her affair and a rough outline of how I was going to use it. "How was your day?" she asked, kissing my cheek with lips that had been kissing another man hours earlier. "Productive," I said. "Very productive." That night, after she fell asleep, I sat at my kitchen table and began making lists. Phone numbers, email addresses, social media contacts, Alyssa's law firm, Craig's mortgage company, his ex-wife, her mother, our mutual friends. If they wanted to destroy our marriage in secret, that was their choice. But they'd made a critical error in assuming I'd go quietly. I was going to make sure their affair became the most public spectacle Edgewater had seen in years. The beauty of being underestimated is that people stop watching you carefully. Over the next 2 weeks, I moved through our house like a ghost, collecting evidence and building my case while Alyssa grew increasingly careless about covering her tracks. She'd started leaving her phone unlocked on the kitchen counter while she showered. Her text messages with Craig had evolved from careful euphemisms to explicit planning. "Can't wait to feel your hands on me again," read one message that made me close the phone before I threw it against the wall. But anger was a luxury I couldn't afford. I needed cold precision. I photographed everything. Text messages, emails, credit card statements, hotel receipts carelessly left in her purse. I documented times, dates, and locations with the methodical attention to detail that had made me a good plant manager. If this was going to be a war, I wanted overwhelming evidence when the shooting started. The hardest part was maintaining the facade at home, sitting across from Alyssa at dinner while she told elaborate lies about her day, listening to Emma talk excitedly about her mother's improved mood without revealing that I knew exactly why Mom seemed so energetic lately. "She's been working out more," Sophie observed one evening while we were doing homework at the kitchen table, "and she bought new clothes." New clothes that I was paying for with money earned fixing the cars of neighbors who looked at me with increasing pity. The whole town was starting to whisper about Dave Patterson, the cuckold mechanic whose wife was stepping out with some hotshot from the city. The whispers reached me through Jerry at the shop. "People are talking, Dave," he said one afternoon while we were replacing a transmission. "Maybe you should know." "I know," I said simply. Jerry's wrench stopped moving. "You know?" "I know everything." "So what are you going to do about it?" I looked up from the engine compartment, meeting his eyes. "I'm going to let them have each other. But first, I was going to make sure everyone else knew exactly what kind of people they really were." The opportunity came in the form of Lorraine Patterson's 75th birthday party. Alyssa's mother had been planning the celebration for months, sending elaborate invitations to everyone in Edgewater's social circle. The party was scheduled for Saturday evening at the country club, with dinner, dancing, and enough gossip to fuel the town for months. It was perfect. I spent the week before the party making final preparations. I had the photos printed at 3 different shops to avoid suspicion. I wrote and rewrote my speech until every word was calculated for maximum impact. I even bought a new suit, telling Alyssa I wanted to look good for her mother's special day. "That's sweet of you," she said, adjusting my tie with hands that had been touching another man hours earlier. "Mom will appreciate the effort." The night before the party, Alyssa worked late again. "Final preparations for the Henderson case," she claimed. I used the time to make copies of everything I'd collected, storing them in a safety deposit box at the bank and with Vic at the bar. "You sure about this?" Vic asked as I handed him the manila envelope. "Once you go nuclear, there's no taking it back." "They made their choice," I said. "Now they get to live with the consequences." Saturday evening arrived with the kind of crisp autumn weather that made Michigan beautiful and dangerous at the same time. Alyssa spent 2 hours getting ready, choosing a dress I'd never seen before and jewelry that hadn't come from me. "You look beautiful," I said as we prepared to leave, and meant it. She did look beautiful, radiant in the way that only a woman in love could look. It just wasn't love for her husband. "Thank you," she said, checking her reflection one final time. "I feel good tonight." The country club looked like it belonged in a glossy magazine, with flowers, candles, and enough elegance to make everyone forget we were in a fading mill town in the middle of nowhere. Lorraine held court at the head table, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, soaking in the attention she'd craved her entire life. I made small talk with relatives and family friends, accepting their condolences about the factory closing and their awkward questions about what I was doing with my life now. Through it all, I watched Alyssa work the room with the skill of a politician, charming everyone with stories about her legal career and her bright future. Craig wasn't there. Too risky, apparently. But I could see Alyssa checking her phone regularly, probably exchanging messages with him throughout the evening. Dinner was served at 7. By 8:30, the speeches began. Alyssa's brother Robert went first, sharing childhood memories and praising their mother's strength and wisdom. Emma followed with a poem she'd written about her grandmother's influence on her life. One by one, family members and friends stood to honor Lorraine Patterson and celebrate her 75 years. Finally, it was my turn. I stood slowly, feeling every eye in the room turn toward me. The conversations died away until the only sound was the clink of silverware against china and the soft jazz music playing from the speakers. "I've been married to Lorraine's daughter for 16 years, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the room. In that time, I've learned a lot about love, commitment, and the promises we make to each other. Alyssa smiled at me from across the table, probably thinking I was about to deliver some sentimental tribute to our marriage. I've learned that love isn't just about the good times, I continued. It's about honesty. It's about keeping your word even when it's difficult. It's about respecting the person you promised to honor. The room was completely silent now. I could see confusion starting to creep into some faces, concern into others. I've also learned that some people view marriage as a convenience rather than a commitment. Some people think their vows are suggestions rather than sacred promises. Alyssa's smile was fading. She'd started to sense that this speech wasn't going where she'd expected. So tonight, on this celebration of family and love, I want to make a toast. I raised my wine glass, and automatically everyone else in the room raised theirs. To old loves. May they finally have each other. The words hung in the air like a curse. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the manila envelope I'd prepared. From it, I extracted a thick stack of papers bound with a blue cover. "Alyssa," I said, my voice carrying across the silent room, "these are for you." I walked around the table and placed the divorce papers directly in front of her plate, right next to her untouched slice of birthday cake. The silence stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Then Lorraine let out a small, wounded sound that broke the spell. "David," she whispered, "what is this?" "This is honesty, Lorraine," I said, still looking at my wife's pale face. "Something that's been in short supply in our family lately." Alyssa's hands were shaking as she stared at the papers. "You can't, not here, not at my mother's party." "When would be better?" I asked. "During one of your Tuesday afternoon meetings with Craig Morrison? Or maybe Thursday evening when you're working late on cases that don't exist?" The gasps around the room were audible now. I could see phones coming out, people starting to record what was clearly going to be the social event of the decade in Edgewater. "I don't know what you think you know," Alyssa said, her voice barely above a whisper, "but you're making a terrible mistake." I pulled out my own phone and opened the photo gallery I'd prepared. The first image showed Alyssa and Craig kissing in the parking lot of Vintner's table. I held it up so the people at nearby tables could see. "This mistake?" I asked. "Or maybe this one?" The next photo showed them entering the hotel together, then another of them at a different restaurant, holding hands across the table like teenagers. "Stop," Alyssa said, reaching for my phone. "Please stop." But I was just getting started. I'd spent 2 weeks preparing for this moment, and I wasn't going to waste it. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, raising my voice so everyone in the room could hear, "I'd like you to meet the real Alyssa Patterson, the woman who's been using our joint credit card to finance an affair with her college boyfriend, the woman who's been lying to our children, to her family, and to everyone in this room for the past 4 months." The room erupted. People were talking, shouting, standing up to get a better view. Phones were recording from every angle. Lorraine was crying, Emma was staring at her mother in shock, and Sophie looked like she was about to be sick. In the middle of it all, Alyssa sat frozen, the divorce papers spread in front of her like an accusation. "You want to know why I chose tonight?" I continued, my voice cutting through the chaos. Because you made this choice public the moment you decided to humiliate me in front of the entire town. Because you involved our daughters in your lies. Because you thought I was too stupid to notice and too weak to fight back. I leaned down so only she could hear my next words. You wanted Craig Morrison? Congratulations. Now you can have him? But you're going to lose everything else. I straightened up and looked around the room at the faces staring back at me. Some showed shock, others sympathy, a few barely concealed excitement at being present for such spectacular drama. I'm sorry for ruining your party, Lorraine, I said to my mother-in-law, who was still crying silently. But I thought you should know what kind of woman you raised. I walked toward the exit, leaving behind the chaos I'd created and the marriage I'd just publicly executed. Behind me, I could hear Alyssa calling my name, but I didn't turn around. In the parking lot, I sat in my truck for a moment, listening to the muffled sounds of shouting from inside the country club. My phone was already buzzing with text messages and missed calls, but I ignored them all. I'd fired the first shot in a war that Alyssa had started, but didn't know she was fighting, and this was just the beginning. The video went viral before I even made it home. Someone at the party had live-streamed my speech on social media, and by Sunday morning, divorce papers at birthday party was trending across 3 platforms. My phone hadn't stopped ringing since I'd walked out of the country club, but I'd turned it off after the 20th call from reporters wanting to interview the scorned husband from Michigan. I spent Sunday morning in my garage, working on the Chevelle and trying to process what I'd unleashed. The car had become my sanctuary, the one place where everything made sense and problems could be solved with the right tools and enough patience. Emma appeared in the doorway around 10, still in her pajamas, her eyes red from crying. Dad? Her voice was small, uncertain. Can we talk? I set down my wrench and wiped my hands on a rag. Of course, sweetheart. She sat on the workbench, swinging her legs like she used to when she was Sophie's age. Is it true? About Mom and that man? There was no point in lying now. The truth was already spreading through Edgewater faster than gossip at a church social. Yes, it's true. For how long? About 4 months. She was quiet for a long time, processing this information. Finally, she looked up at me with eyes that seemed much older than 14. I'm sorry, Dad. About what I said that night. I didn't understand. You were excited about your mother being happy. There's nothing wrong with that. But I helped her lie to you. I moved closer to her, putting my hands on her shoulders. Emma, listen to me. What happened between your mother and me isn't your fault. Not any of it. You're a kid, and kids shouldn't have to worry about their parents' problems. She started crying then, and I held her while she sobbed out her confusion and anger and fear about what was going to happen to our family. Through the garage window, I could see neighbors walking past our house more slowly than usual, hoping to catch a glimpse of the drama that had made their quiet street famous. Where's your mother? I asked when Emma's tears had slowed. She left early this morning. Said she was going to stay with Grandma Lorraine for a few days. Of course she was. Lorraine's house was the fortress of Edgewater's social elite, the place where damaged reputations went to be rehabilitated, but I doubted even Lorraine's influence could repair the damage from last night's performance. Sophie appeared in the doorway, looking confused and frightened. Dad, there are people with cameras outside. I looked past her and saw a news van parked across the street, its satellite dish extended toward the sky. A reporter was setting up in front of our mailbox, probably preparing to broadcast live from the scene of the most entertaining marital breakdown in recent memory. Girls, pack some clothes, I said. We're going to stay at Uncle Vic's for a few days. Vic's apartment above the bar wasn't much, but it was private and defensible. More importantly, Vic understood the kind of war I was fighting and wouldn't ask uncomfortable questions about my methods. We spent Sunday afternoon watching the story spread across social media. The hashtag #CharnChong Divorce Party Dad was trending nationally, with thousands of people sharing their opinions about my public confrontation with Alyssa. Most of the comments were supportive. Apparently, there were a lot of people who'd fantasized about exposing a cheating spouse in such spectacular fashion. But support from strangers on the internet wasn't going to help me with the more practical aspects of my situation. Alyssa was a lawyer, which meant she understood the legal system better than I did. She also had her family's money and social connections to draw on. I had a failing auto repair shop and a viral video. Monday morning brought the next phase of the war. I arrived at my shop to find Jerry waiting outside with a grim expression and a manila envelope in his hand. This came by courier an hour ago, he said, handing me the envelope. Inside were legal documents demanding that I cease and desist from harassment, stalking, and public defamation of Alyssa Patterson. The letter was signed by Marcus Webb from Webb, Chen and Associates, the most expensive law firm in Grand Rapids. "She's not wasting any time," I muttered. "There's more," Jerry said. "I got a call this morning from the landlord. Says there have been complaints about the shop, questions about our business license and environmental compliance. Someone's been making calls." I looked around my small garage, taking inventory of everything that could be used against me. The oil disposal system that was probably one inspection away from being declared non-compliant. The paperwork that was always a month behind. The dozen small violations that every small business accumulated over time. Alyssa was using her legal connections to attack my livelihood. But two could play that game. I spent Monday afternoon making phone calls of my own to the Michigan Bar Association, filing a complaint about Alyssa's use of legal resources for personal vendettas, to Craig's mortgage company, asking questions about their employee's relationship with a married woman and whether that reflected their company values, to the local newspaper, offering to give my side of the story that was already spreading across the internet. The newspaper interview was scheduled for Wednesday. The Bar Association complaint would take weeks to process, but Craig's employer was more immediately responsive. Tuesday afternoon, I received a call from a woman who identified herself as the HR director at Morrison Financial Services. "Mr. Patterson, this is Janet Rodriguez from Morrison Financial. I understand you've raised some concerns about one of our employees." "I have," I said. "I thought you should know that Craig Morrison has been conducting an affair with a married woman, using company time and resources to facilitate their meetings. That's a serious accusation. Do you have documentation?" I did. Hotel receipts showing afternoon meetings during business hours, credit card records of expensive lunches that coincided with Craig's social media posts from restaurants across the state, text messages discussing their relationship that included references to his work schedule. "I can provide documentation," I said, "but I think you should also know that this affair has become very public. There are videos online, news coverage. Your employee's personal conduct is reflecting on your company's reputation." The HR director was quiet for a moment. "We'll look into this matter and get back to you." She hung up, and I allowed myself a small smile. Craig Morrison was about to learn that actions had consequences. Wednesday brought the newspaper interview and the first signs that my strategy was working. The reporter, a young woman named Sarah Chen, met me at Murphy's bar and listened while I laid out the complete timeline of Alyssa's affair. "You documented everything," she said, reviewing the evidence I'd provided. "This is incredibly thorough. I'm a detail-oriented person. Some people might say this level of documentation suggests obsessive behavior." I met her eyes. "Some people might say that a lawyer using her professional connections to harass her husband's business suggests unethical behavior." She wrote that down. The story ran in Thursday's edition under the headline, "Local Businessman Fights Back Against Cheating Wife." It included photos from the birthday party confrontation, excerpts from Alyssa's text messages, and a detailed timeline of the affair that made both her and Craig look like calculating predators. More importantly, it included quotes from several local business owners expressing concern about lawyers who use their professional status to settle personal scores. Thursday afternoon, I received another call from Morrison Financial Services. "Mr. Patterson, this is Janet Rodriguez again. I wanted to inform you that Craig Morrison is no longer employed with our company." "I see." "His conduct violated our employee handbook and reflected poorly on our corporate values. We appreciate you bringing this matter to our attention." Craig Morrison had lost his job, but I wasn't finished with him yet. Friday evening, I drove to his house, the overpriced McMansion in the suburbs where he'd been living off his mortgage broker commissions and planning his future with my wife. His Tesla was in the driveway, but the for sale sign on the lawn suggested he was already feeling financial pressure. I parked across the street and waited. He came out around 8 o'clock, probably heading to meet Alyssa for another romantic evening, but when he reached his car, he stopped short. All 4 tires were flat. I'd used a small nail to puncture each tire in a way that would cause a slow leak rather than an obvious blowout. It was subtle, deniable, and expensive to fix. Craig walked around his car, examining the damage and pulling out his phone to call for help. While he waited for the tow truck, he kept looking around the neighborhood, probably wondering who might have targeted him. I started my engine and drove away, leaving him stranded in his own driveway with his deflated car and his rapidly deflating life. But the tires were just a message. The real attack was still coming. Saturday morning, I received a call that changed everything. "Dave, this is Tom Bradley, Craig's ex-wife's attorney." I knew the name. Tom Bradley was a divorce lawyer with a reputation for aggressive tactics and expensive settlements. "What can I do for you, Tom?" "I understand you have information about Craig Morrison's recent activities. My client is interested in revising her divorce settlement based on new evidence of financial misconduct. Craig's ex-wife wanted to reopen their divorce case. If she could prove that he'd been hiding assets or using marital funds to conduct an affair, she could go after his remaining money and property. I might have some information that would be helpful, I said. Would you be willing to provide testimony and documentation? I thought about Craig Morrison, sitting in his overpriced house with his flat tires and his unemployed status, about to face a legal battle that would strip him of everything he had left. I'd be happy to help, I said. The war was escalating exactly as I'd planned. Alyssa had lost her husband and her reputation, Craig had lost his job and was about to lose his house. But I still had one more move to make. One final strike that would ensure they got exactly what they deserved. Each other and nothing else. The final confrontation came on a cold November evening, 3 weeks after the birthday party that had destroyed my marriage and made me temporarily famous across social media. The video of my speech had been viewed over 2 million times, spawning countless reaction videos and think pieces about modern marriage and public revenge. But the internet's attention span was short, and the reporters had moved on to other stories. What remained was the wreckage of several lives and the question of what came next. I was closing up the shop when Alyssa appeared in the doorway, looking like a shadow of the confident woman who'd been conducting her affair with such careless arrogance just a month earlier. She'd lost weight, and her expensive clothes couldn't hide the toll that 3 weeks of public humiliation had taken on her. "We need to talk," she said. I continued organizing my tools, not looking at her. "I think we've said everything that needs saying. The girls are asking questions I can't answer. Emma wants to know why you won't come home. Sophie cries herself to sleep every night." That got my attention. I looked up at her, seeing the desperation in her eyes. "Where's Craig? Shouldn't he be helping you figure out how to explain this mess to our daughters?" Her face crumpled slightly. "Craig and we're taking a break." I almost laughed. "A break? How romantic." "His ex-wife is suing him for everything. He lost his job because of what you did. He can't afford to be seen with me right now." "So the great love affair is over because it became inconvenient." She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering in the cold garage. "I made mistakes, Dave. I know that. But what you did at my mother's party, the way you've systematically destroyed everything, it's cruel." "Cruel?" I set down my wrench and gave her my full attention. "You want to talk about cruel? Let's talk about listening to my own daughter discuss how stupid I was for not noticing your affair. Let's talk about paying for hotel rooms where you entertained another man. Let's talk about the humiliation of having the entire town know my wife was cheating before I did. I never meant for it to happen. You researched divorce lawyers, Alyssa. You Googled child custody laws. You planned your exit strategy while I was still trying to save our marriage." She stared at me, probably realizing that I knew about her internet searches. "You went through my computer." "I went through everything. Your phone, your email, your credit card statements. I documented every lie, every hotel receipt, every romantic dinner you charged to our joint account." "So what now?" she asked. "You've destroyed my career, my reputation, my relationship with Craig. You've turned our daughters against me and made me a laughingstock in this town. What more do you want?" I looked at this woman I'd loved for 16 years, this stranger who'd systematically betrayed everything we'd built together and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. "I want you to understand something," I said. "You didn't lose your career because I exposed your affair. You lost it because you used your position as a lawyer to harass my business when I found out. You didn't lose your relationship with Craig because I made it public. You lost it because he's a coward who runs when things get difficult. And you didn't turn our daughters against you. You did that when you involved them in your lies." She was crying now, but I felt no urge to comfort her. Those tears were 4 months too late. "The girls need stability," she said. "They need their father to come home." "They need parents who tell them the truth, something you've forgotten how to do." "I'll do anything," she said. "Counseling, therapy, whatever it takes. We can fix this." I shook my head. "There's nothing to fix. You made your choice when you started meeting Craig at hotels. I made mine when I decided to stop pretending I didn't know about it. So that's it? 16 years of marriage, and you're just going to throw it all away?" "I didn't throw anything away. You did, one lie at a time." She stood there for a moment, probably hoping I'd change my mind or show some sign of the man who'd once loved her unconditionally. But that man was gone, replaced by someone harder and less forgiving. "The divorce papers," she said finally. "Some of your demands are unreasonable." "Which ones?" "Full custody of the girls. Half of my retirement account. The house." I picked up my tools and started putting them away, taking my time with each one. "Let me explain how this works, Alyssa. You conducted a 4-month affair using marital assets. You lied to our children and used them as alibis. You attempted to use your legal connections to harass my business. Any judge who sees the evidence I've collected is going to be very sympathetic to my position. You can't prove I used my legal connections. I pulled out my phone and showed her a recorded conversation. Marcus Webb from your law firm called my landlord personally to discuss concerns about my business license. He mentioned that a colleague had brought the matter to his attention. Want to guess which colleague? Her face went pale. You recorded that? I recorded everything. Every phone call, every conversation, every threat. You're not the only one who knows how to build a legal case. She sank onto the workbench, the fight going out of her. What do you want from me? I want you to sign the divorce papers as written. I want joint custody with primary residence with me. I want you to stop using your legal connections to harass my business. And I want you to explain to our daughters why their family is broken. And if I don't agree? I showed her another folder, thick with documents and photographs. Then I release everything to the media. The text messages, the hotel receipts, the evidence of your professional misconduct. Your legal career won't just be damaged, it'll be over. She looked through the folder with shaking hands, seeing the complete record of her affair laid out like evidence in a criminal trial. You really hate me, don't you? I don't hate you, I said, and realized it was true. I just don't love you anymore. That disappeared the moment you chose Craig Morrison over our family. He was a mistake. No, he was a choice. Every hotel room, every lie, every time you used our daughters as cover for your affair, those were choices. And choices have consequences. She closed the folder and handed it back to me. I'll sign the papers. Smart decision. She started toward the door, then turned back. For what it's worth, I am sorry. About the way it happened, about the lies, about everything. I know you are, I said. You're sorry you got caught. After she left, I sat in my garage for a long time, surrounded by the tools of my trade and the satisfaction of a plan perfectly executed. Alyssa would sign the divorce papers, Craig Morrison would lose everything in his ex-wife's lawsuit, and I would have my daughters and my dignity. The town would eventually find new gossip to occupy their attention. The internet would move on to other viral videos, but everyone would remember the night Dave Patterson stood up in front of Edgewater's social elite and refused to be a victim. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Dad, when are you coming home? I typed back, soon, sweetheart, very soon. I locked up the shop and drove through the quiet streets of Edgewater, past the closed factory and the empty storefronts, past the country club where I'd declared war on my old life and won. At home, the girls were waiting for me with homework questions and stories about their day, treating me like I'd never been gone. They didn't ask about their mother or the divorce or the videos that had made our family temporarily famous. They just wanted their father back. As I helped Sophie with her math homework and listened to Emma practice her presentation for English class, I realized that I'd gotten exactly what I'd wanted from my revenge. Not just justice or satisfaction, but the chance to build something new from the ashes of what Alyssa had destroyed. She'd wanted Craig Morrison, and now she could have him, along with his unemployment, his legal troubles, and his cowardice. They deserved each other. I had something better. My daughters, my self-respect, and the knowledge that I'd fought back against betrayal and won. The old Dave Patterson, the one who'd believed in fairness and second chances, was gone forever. In his place was someone harder but more honest, someone who understood that sometimes the only way to save what matters is to destroy what doesn't. Outside, the November wind rattled the windows of our house, but inside we were warm and safe and finally free from the lies that had poisoned our family. It was enough. It was everything.